with your host, RenTen ASMR. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a reaction to a previous one of my videos. If you may have noticed at the very beginning of the season, or actually before the season even began, I posted a video called Painting the 2023-2024 NFL Playoff Picture. So this was a video that I did on MS Paint, or Paint 3D, I guess the more updated version, where I wrote out all of the teams in the NFL and I made a slight prediction on how I thought their season was going to go. And to conclude the video, I wrapped up with a segment on which teams I thought were going to make the playoffs in this season. So now that the NFL season is over, we can go back, take a look at what my predictions were, and see what I got right and what I got horribly wrong. And so, in addition to that, I'll compare what my predicted playoff picture was to what the actual playoff picture ended up being. So we'll get a nice little contrast on how things were anticipated to go and how they actually went. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, starting off, in my original video, I had a prediction for the NFC and the AFC. We'll start with the NFC predictions because I made a nice little summarization slide for it. As you know, there are 14 teams in the NFL that can make the playoffs. You have the 1 seeds that have the bye week, and then you have seeds 2 through 7. This is an expanded playoff picture that was adjusted, I believe, 2 years ago. It used to be just 6 teams from each conference, but now we have 7 teams and an adjusted playoff schedule with a bigger wildcard weekend. So, yeah, of these 7 teams that I predicted to make the NFL playoffs, there were NFC playoffs. There were 4 teams that I got correct. And so I'm very proud of that. You know, going 4 of 7 is not too shabby. I'll take what I can get. And I was pretty close on 2 other picks. So realistically, I was not that far off the mark on 6 of my 7 picks. And then there was one that I was just way off about. So let's dive right into it. When predicting the winner of the NFC North, my gut feeling was the Minnesota Vikings. Now this is a pick that I will, obviously the Vikings did not make the playoffs this year, but I will still stand by this pick. Up until week 18, the Vikings were in playoff contention, and that is after a very injured and battered up season from their main offensive superstars. You had Kirk Cousins going down for the entire year with a torn Achilles, and Justin Jefferson also missing 7 games this year. So obviously with these injuries, it was going to be very hard for the Vikings to progress to the postseason the way I had predicted, but even then they still almost did it. It came down to the wire for them, and yeah, they couldn't figure out the quarterback carousel after Kirk Cousins went down. You lose your leader like that, it is going to be tough, but the Vikings showed that they have a very solid roster. They just need their leader back. So yeah, a swing and a miss in that category. The Vikings, would they have won the division outright the way I was predicting? No, I think I did get that aspect of it wrong. The Lions, they showed up with a lot more intensity and fight than I was expecting. I was thinking that they would be a wild card team. So that is a prediction that I got correct. I thought that the Lions would make the playoffs as a wild card team. They ended up finishing as the NFC North division leader. So yeah, I'll take it. After that, for the NFC East, I predicted that the winner of that division would be the Eagles. This was pretty true up until like week 13. I was pretty happy with that pick. I was thinking that the Eagles were going to break that streak of no NFC East repeated leaders in the last 19 years. But they decided to crumble in like the last 7 games just to prove me wrong. So the Eagles did make the playoffs, so that is another one that I got correct. But the actual NFC East leader was the Cowboys. And so I did have the Cowboys making the playoffs once again as a wild card seed. So both are teams that I got correct. I just got the positioning of it wrong. But I'll take it, you know. After that, I had the 49ers making the playoffs as the winner of the NFC West. That one I hit right on the money, no doubt about it. They finished as the 1 seed. I didn't do a seeded projection on my painting the playoff picture, so I don't know how good I thought they were going to be, but this is the one that I hit exactly as it is, so I'm happy with that one. And then for the NFC South, I had the Saints winning it. This is one that I thought the Saints were going to win by default. I thought that the competition was just too poor for them to lose it. This was also a pick that I'm not too unhappy with. I do think that until the very last week they were in the running. They almost made it, but they were just slightly more lousy than I was expecting. I didn't expect them to be that bad at all. I thought their schedule was really easy and that they would be better than what they actually were. So yeah, I missed that by 1 game. It actually ended up being Tampa Bay that won the NFC South. That was one that I didn't see coming at all, but it's fine, not the worst. Then, as I mentioned, in my wildcard seeds, I had the Lions and Cowboys, which are 2 teams that did make the playoffs, so I was correct. But the team that I really missed the mark on, where I was horribly wrong in this entire grand scheme of things, is the New York Giants. I thought that the New York Giants would build on last season's success and just build on that momentum and ride it into yet another playoff seed. I thought that we were going to have another year of 3 NFC East teams, but I should have known that the NFC East is not like that. The Giants had a colossal meltdown. They started off the season horribly. Then Daniel Jones went down, Saquon Barkley went down, and then they had a little bit of pizzazz and reinvigoration with Tommy DeVito, and people were happy for a bit. And then Tommy DeVito started playing bad, so everyone got mad again. So yeah, the Giants really were nowhere near the playoffs at any point this season. That is one that I would fully accept as a horrible pick. And yeah, it is what it is. After that, let's move into the AFC side of things. Now, unfortunately for me, I did not make a nice AFC summarization slide in that video, so I'm just gonna have to go through it division by division. So we'll start with the AFC East. From this division, I thought that the Bills were going to win the division, and you know, it came down to the very, very last week of the season, but that came true. I got that right on the money as well. The Bills did win this division. They still own the AFC East. And yeah, I'm proud that I was able to make that call and that it panned out very last second. After that, I had another AFC East team making the playoffs, but it was not the Dolphins. It was actually the Jets. Now the Jets, this is not a pick I'm mad with. Obviously, they were not that close to making the playoffs, but I did think that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the quarterback for the Jets this season, and not a culmination of Trevor Siemian and Zach Wilson and what was that other guy? Tim Boyle. Yeah, didn't know. At no point was I thinking that during my predictions. So the Jets not making it is another one that is due to injury, especially Aaron Rodgers getting hurt on the very first series of his very first game that changed the entire outlook of the entire season. So I'm not mad at this pick. I probably would roll with it again next year. And it's just really unfortunate that the Jets had to endure a season like that. They are still looking for their first playoff seed, playoff berth in like, what is it, 2007? No, it can't be that. 2013. They have the longest playoff drought in NFL, the current NFL. So maybe they'll be able to fix that next year. But I'll take the Bills. I got one right. Then with the AFC North. With the AFC North, I was a little bit off on this division. Very interestingly, every team in the AFC North finished with a positive record in this one, which is actually something that I addressed I was talking about how the Bengals are dominant, how the Ravens are always good when Lamar is playing, and how the Steelers always manage to finish above a positive record. So that would make it very hard for the Browns to succeed. What I didn't consider was the Bengals getting hurt and the Browns not needing the other teams to do poorly. I didn't realize that it was possible for 4 teams to finish with a positive record at the end of a season. So, my mistake in that category. When predicting this, I thought that the Bengals would be the winner. I thought that they would make the playoffs, and I thought that the Ravens would make the playoffs. I still stand by this prediction. The Ravens obviously did make the playoffs, so I was correct on that one. And the Bengals did not make it, but they were out of it by about 2 games. They still finished with a positive record, and really it's because Joe Burrow got hurt. Right before Joe Burrow going down, the Bengals were one of the hottest teams in the NFL. They started off pretty poor, then they very much turned it around, and then unfortunately he got injured and out for the rest of the year. But I think if Joe Burrow was at quarterback for the Bengals, they definitely would have made the playoffs. That is my personal belief. The Steelers creeping in last second. I'm not mad that I snubbed them at all. They needed a miracle kind of situation in week 18 to make the playoffs anyways, and they got hot at the very last second. And I did say that I thought that they were going to be a positive team. So yeah, realistically, they went 9-8, and they barely happened to make it. I would still probably count them out again next year. So I missed on that, but I'm not too mad. But the Browns, I was thoroughly surprised with how they played this year. I was wrong. I was severely wrong about the Browns. I thought in a very cramped division there would just be no space for them to succeed, but actually they finished as the second best team in this division, and yeah, they look good. They look significantly good. They could make some waves in this playoffs. And yeah, hats off to the Browns. Then we will move into the AFC South. And yeah, just to preface, I didn't get this right. I thought that this was going to be a Jaguars-led division. I thought that the Jaguars were going to be the only team even really in consideration for the playoffs from the AFC South. At the very beginning of the year, you had the Jonathan Taylor news for the Colts. I thought that the Colts were going to be lousy, plus that news meaning they're going to be awful. I thought that the Titans were going to be meh, and I think I got that correct. And the Texans, I just thought that the rebuild would take longer and they wouldn't be good yet. So, safe to say, I was pretty wrong about this division. The Jaguars making the playoffs. I think if Trevor Lawrence doesn't get hurt with 2 weeks left, they probably do make it. They just barely missed it. They had a meltdown against the Titans, and 2 weeks prior, Trevor Lawrence got hurt. So if he stays healthy, I think they win one more of those last 2 losses in the last 3 weeks. They started off really well, and then they kind of had a meltdown to miss it. I am not mad at that pick at all. They were just barely missing it. The Texans, though, I will say I was very, very wrong about the Texans. They finished at 10-7. I didn't think they would be anywhere near that. I thought this was going to be a 3-4 win team. So yeah, very good job to CJ Stroud, the Texans organization, new rookies, and everyone involved for being a big surprise playoff team. So I was very shocked and surprised. And lastly, you have the AFC West. This is a division that I thought was going to be fairly easy to predict. In terms of the winner, I thought that the Chiefs were going to win this, and I wrote duh. And yeah, I stick with that. The Chiefs did win it. They won this division, and I got that right, so I'll take that. But after that, this was one that, looking back on, it was an interesting pick. I had the Broncos making the playoffs. I had the Chargers not making it, and I had the Raiders not making it. Those were both good calls. Neither team was going to make it. I never felt like they were going to make it at any point either. But the Broncos. Let's take a look at them. They started off the season horribly. Then they completely turned it around and got back to even. And then you had all this behind-the-scenes Russell Wilson drama with the coaching staff and Russell Wilson. So let's say that didn't happen. Maybe the locker room would have been more cohesive. Maybe Russell Wilson would have been been able to lead this team better because he wasn't in direct conflict with the coaching staff. And if they didn't bench him for the last 2 games, I think that they... Actually, did they win their last game? I think they lost their very last one, and they won their second to last one. Yeah. I think that they win those last 2. Whatever they finished with, they could have finished slightly above it. Yeah, there's a lot of things at play. Obviously, if you're a quarterback and your team comes to you and says, if you do not void your contract, we are going to bench you for the rest of the season, that is a very hard thing to deal with. So, extreme respect to Russell Wilson for the way he navigated that. The Broncos are a trash organization for ever doing that. Sean Payton is a lousy coach, in my opinion, for what he did to Russell Wilson. But this pick wasn't the worst. It was more of a risky pick. I knew that the Broncos had a lot to turn around, and early season it looked horrible. I looked like I was ready to let go of it, and then by mid-season I was like, yeah, I support this. And really it was my own team, the Patriots, that prevented this from happening. So it was close. I won't say that I was horribly off on it. I think that there was a solid chance of this happening, but behind the scenes drama and dysfunction and a late season benching really mitigated the Broncos' chances of making the playoffs. So a swing and a miss, but I'm not upset with the pick. After it's all said and done, I think there was a solid shot. So to recap, who I thought was going to make the playoffs from the AFC, that would have been the Chiefs, the Jaguars, the Buffalo Bills, and the Bengals. And then my wildcard teams were the Jets, the Ravens, and the Broncos. So of those, it looks like the Jaguars was wrong, the Bengals was wrong, the Broncos were wrong, and the Jets were wrong. And in place of those teams, you had the Browns, the Steelers, the Dolphins, and the Texans. So I went 3 of 7 on my AFC picks. But that was really decided by the very last week. The Jaguars, I was very close, almost to the very end. And yeah, Bengals was due to injury. Broncos, it didn't pan out, but I don't really mind it. Yeah, and then Jets is my worst pick, but that's also... Did I already say? Yeah, 2 of those picks are just due to injury, so I'm not mad at it. Overall, I went 7 of 14 on my playoff picks. I got half of the picture correct. And my biggest misses were really the Giants. The Giants are the only team that had a season that was way off the money from what I was predicting. They were nowhere near the playoffs. All the other ones, it's either injury or they just barely missed it, so I'm not mad at the pick. There were certainly some teams that I underestimated heavily. But yeah, so let's take a look at who actually made the playoffs now. So the teams that actually ended up in the playoffs this year, this is not the correct year. There's no way I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah, the Seahawks did not make it. Yeah, so the teams that actually ended up making the playoffs, once again, on the AFC side of things, you had the Baltimore Ravens at the 1 seed, the Buffalo Bills as the 2 seed, the Kansas City Chiefs as the 3 seed, the Houston Texans as the 4 seed, the Cleveland Browns as the 5 seed, the Miami Dolphins as the 6 seed, the Pittsburgh Steelers as the 7 seed. And then on the NFC side of things, you had the San Francisco 49ers as the 1 seed, the Dallas Cowboys as the 2 seed, the Detroit Lions as the 3 seed, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the 4 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles as the 5 seed, the LA Rams as the 6 seed, and the Green Bay Packers as the 7 seed. The Rams, I was kind of underwhelmed by their season last year. I didn't know how healthy everyone was going to be. I saw a lot of things saying that they had a really bad roster. I didn't know if Sean McVay was going to bounce back. It was really just an uncharacteristic season for them all around last year, and I didn't know what to expect, but they proved me wrong. They crawled back into it. The Packers were one that I really didn't think. Like, Jordan Love was too big of an exclamation, or not an exclamation mark, a question mark for me. I'd never seen him play. I didn't know at all if they would be able to do it. They barely squeezed into that last spot. So, hats off to them, but, like, I don't feel bad about snubbing them at all. Tampa Bay really was the biggest surprise in this entire NFC side of things. Baker was a huge question mark for me. I know that Baker has bounced around. I really do like Baker. I liked him on the Browns. I was rooting for him. I was hoping that we would be able to turn it around, but did I expect him to be able to do it? No, not particularly. I was not sure about the chemistry. I didn't know what his fit was going to be like. Obviously, living up to Tom Brady in a team is impossible, so I thought it was going to be hard, but the division was very, very weak, and so Tampa Bay was able to rise out to the top, so there you have it. Those are the teams that I predicted to make the playoffs, and then the teams that actually made the playoffs. So now that we know for sure who is actually going to be in the playoffs, let's talk about Wildcard Weekend. Let's see what these matchups look like, and I'll tell you, based on who actually made the playoffs, who I think is going to advance to the Divisional Round. So, first up, on Saturday, this is, by the way, called Super Wildcard Weekend now because we have extra games now that we've been expanded to a 7-team format. So, just for an idea of how this works, you have the 1 seed in both conferences. They get a bye week. They don't have to play this first week of the playoffs, but the 2 seed will play the 7 seed, the 3 seed will play the 6 seed, and the 4 seed will play the 5 seed in both conferences. So that comes out to a total of 6 playoff games that you get to watch this weekend. And that all starts on January 13th, which is a Saturday, with the 5th and 4th showdown between the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. Now, as I mentioned before, Houston Texans, big surprise. I don't think anyone expected them to be here. I certainly did not. And the Browns, I also didn't really expect them to be here. So let's just assess where these two teams are. The Browns clinched the playoffs quite a few games ago. I think it's been like 3 games that they've been clinched. For a while, they held on to the opportunity. They were one of the few teams that could take the 1 seed away from the Ravens. So they've had a great season. They're being carried by a great defense and phenomenal coaching from Kevin Stefanski, keeping this team together after a plethora of injuries. You have Deshaun Watson going down for the year. You have Nick Chubb going down for the year. And yet, this Cleveland Browns team has put together the best season in recent memory. And right now, they're being led by quarterback Joe Flacco, who is a proven veteran, a proven playoff winner. A lot of people do like to call him elite. He did win that 1 Super Bowl with the Ravens. He can throw the deep ball like anything, like one of the best deep ball arm talents in the league. And he gets to verse a Houston Texans team that is younger, unproven. They're turning things around. Head coach D'Amico Ryans helped turn this team around, along with C.J. Stroud, Tank Dell, Will Anderson. They're playing solid on both sides of the ball. But when it comes down to the playoffs, one thing that I really think is key is experience. You do need to know how to navigate a playoff run, and that is something that C.J. Stroud, this is his first year. He's just a rookie. I don't expect him to know it at all, but it's very hard to, in your first year, go to the playoffs and immediately have a huge level of success. Now, if he does it, I would be very, very impressed. I would think super highly of the Texans next year. They'd probably become my favorites to take over the division. But on the other half, you you have more veteran-type guys on the Browns, in my opinion. Some people on this squad were on the team when Baker Mayfield led them to the playoffs a couple years ago. Then you have Joe Flacco, who, yes, he is a backup, yes, he is old, but he is a proven playoff winner. He has had some great playoff performances. And, yeah, this team is just more experienced. And for that reason, I'm going to have to go with the Cleveland Browns over the Houston Texans in this matchup. So, yeah, that is the first upset that I am picking in this Super Wildcard Weekend. Then moving into the Sunday night game, you have the 6th-seeded Miami Dolphins traveling to Kansas City to play against none other than the Kansas City Chiefs. This is going to be an interesting matchup because it is another reunion between old friends, new foes. You've got Tyreek Hill visiting his old home team. I think for the first time, Tyreek Hill 2 years ago was traded to the Dolphins by the Chiefs. He wanted a really big contract, and they just couldn't justify paying him that much amount of money, even though he was worth it, because they already had big contracts to Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, and it was just too much. And I think they also needed to pay some guys on defense, so they traded him to the Dolphins. And really, this is a trade that has kind of worked out for both teams. Tyreek has proved that it wasn't Patrick Mahomes that was keeping him afloat. He truly is one of the best wide receivers in the league, regardless of who's at quarterback. He's had 2 phenomenal seasons with the Dolphins. But on the other hand, the Chiefs also proved that they didn't really need Tyreek. Last year, they went out with a questionable receiving core, and they won the Super Bowl. So we are looking at the defending Super Bowl champs playing against their old friend. The Dolphins, they are a very exciting team, coached by Mike McDaniels. He is an offensive specialist. He's a guru. Very exciting to watch. Explosive, fast offense between Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane, and Raheem Mostert. They're just all very fast guys, and Tua can get the ball to them in their places pretty well. Whereas the Chiefs, they're the Chiefs. Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes. If you have these guys on your team in the postseason, that is a good combination. Like, they've won 2 Super Bowls in recent memory, in the last 5 years. This is actually their worst outing from a season as of late. They have not played an AFC away game in the playoffs since Patrick Mahomes took over as quarterback. So the fact that they might have to do that this year is honestly, it's crazy that the 3 seed is the worst that they've done recently. But looking at this matchup, I think the most important thing to consider is the Miami Dolphins' track record against good teams. The Dolphins, they have gotten to a point where they are a good team. You can easily count on them to beat teams that are mid or bad. But when they're actually facing against good opponents, good playoff level teams, they do not always answer the call. This season, they finally picked up a win against a 500 or better team when they beat the Cowboys. But that victory was also by 1 point, and it came down to the wire. Other than that, they've lost. They lost to the Chiefs earlier this year when they played in Germany. They lost both games to the Buffalo Bills. To lose the 2 seed that they had, they were winning the AFC East the entire season, and in the very last week, they let that get away from them. So that is something that's pretty significant. You also have Bradley Chubb going down for the year. Now, I'm not going to say that Kansas City is going to roll over this team, because Kansas City does look like their most beatable that they've ever looked. They have huge question marks in the wide receiver category. They really could use a guy like Tyreek Hill, a sure-handed guy. Other than Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice, there's no one in this receiving group that Mahomes can really trust. So they're not looking as dominant as they have. But considering they got it done earlier this year, and they still are the Chiefs, and the Chiefs turn up in January, I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this one. I think that Miami gets bounced in the first round. I think it could be a very fun game, a very explosive game if it needs to be. But yeah, I can't see the Chiefs losing in the first round like this. I do think that they will win this game and advance to the divisional round. After that, you move into the Sunday slate. Sunday will have 3 games, so a nice long day of playoff football for you. The first game will be the conclusion of the AFC side of things. You have the 7th seeded Pittsburgh Steelers facing off against the 2nd seeded Buffalo Bills. This one I don't really feel like I need to get into all that much. The Buffalo Bills are led by Josh Allen and their regular crew, Sean McDermott, all that, Stephon Diggs. Diggs has had a rather poor season compared to his last couple, but the Bills, they started off shaky and then they ended on an extremely hot note. They are the best team in football in the last 5 weeks in terms of wins. They had the longest win streak to enter the playoffs with a win streak of 5 games. So these Bills are red hot. They turned it around. At one point they were 6-6. They finished the season at 11-6. So yeah, huge credit to them. The Steelers, on the other hand, they did win 3 straight games, all with Mason Rudolph taking over at quarterback for them. But we still do have to recognize that it's Mason Rudolph, a 3rd-string quarterback playing. Mason Rudolph is not a guy that I trust to win a playoff game. On top of that, even though they're well coached and Mike Tomlin is great, the Steelers still do enter the playoffs as the only team with a negative point differential. They allowed more points this season than they scored, and that is not a good look. Last year, through a bunch of weeks, the Vikings were a negative differential team. They finished at like 13-4, but for majority of the season they had a negative point differential, and we saw how that fared for them in the playoffs. So I don't think that is a recipe for success. I think that Buffalo is pretty good in the first round of the playoffs recently. Josh Allen could have like a 4-touchdown, 0-interception game and get them off to a great start. He has put some good playoff performances together, even though Buffalo has not had a good, deep playoff run. And yeah, I think that they start off on the right foot yet again, and the Bills take down the Steelers in this matchup. After that, you move into the first NFC playoff game, which is yet another 7th seed versus 2nd seed situation. You've got the Green Bay Packers traveling to Dallas to face off against the Cowboys. Now, this is a game that could be interesting considering the recent matchups between these two teams. If you think back to the last couple times that the Packers and the Cowboys have fought in the playoffs, it's some very devastating losses for the Cowboys. I think I saw a stat recently that said that the Packers are actually 4-0 in postseason in AT&T Stadium. So the Packers have never lost when visiting Dallas. But granted, that was with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is a MVP, multiple-time MVP, Hall of Fame level quarterback. He put together some great game-winning drives. You also had the Dez Bryant is it a catch, not catch game where truly I do think Dez Bryant got it and they got choked. They got cheated out of a victory there. So yeah, plus this is a Mike McCarthy revenge game. Mike McCarthy used to be the leader, the head coach for the Packers in some of their defeats, in some of the Cowboys' defeats. But now he is quarterback for the Cowboys. So it should be very interesting. But just taking a look at these two teams, the Cowboys are like top 3 in point differential. They are undefeated at home. They are playing this game at home, and they have not lost a single game at home this season. They are phenomenal. They average like above 35 points a game at home this year. Their defense is stellar. They got Micah Parsons. Deron Bland is the guy with all those pick sixes this year. They're nice on defense, and offensively, Dak has had a good end of season stretch. Some people were talking about him in the MVP conversation after a while. So yeah, Jordan Love still relatively unproven. He finished it off getting the Packers in, and he had an all-around pretty good first year at the helm. But he still needs to work on his game a little. He can get a little turnover heavy. Matt LaFleur has not had any postseason games with Jordan Love yet, and this team, I do see them as someone that just barely made the playoffs, whereas the Cowboys, they were a strong 2nd seed, and they haven't lost a game at home, so I think pretty clearly the Cowboys are going to win this game. After that, you've got a matchup 4th-seeded Los Angeles Rams and the 3rd-seeded Detroit Lions. Now the Lions, they have had a great season, their best in recent memory ever since I've been alive. Their first clinching of a playoff spot, of a division lead since, I don't know the year, 30 years ago. I guess that would put that at, 1993. Since 1993, they have not clinched the NFC North, and they finally did it. So, great year for them. They are turning things around with Dan Campbell and Jared Goff and these young guys. Whereas the Rams, they turned things up. They're the second hottest team in football. They ended on a 4-game win streak, which is the second best. And this is a team that a lot of people undermined going into the season, including me, just because they had a huge fall off after their Super Bowl victory. They went into the playoffs as the 4th seed that year. They won the Super Bowl, and then they just completely fell apart last year, largely due to injury, but it was very unexpected, and so a lot of people didn't know what direction this team was going to be in, but now they entered the playoffs as a solid 6 team, and I don't think it's necessarily a team you want to face. This also has a little bit of added sauce, a little bit of added heat in this game because the Rams and Lions exchanged quarterbacks. You had Matthew Stafford, who was the franchise leader for the Lions for the longest time, and he got traded to the Rams where he won the Super Bowl. And then Jared Goff was the quarterback for the Rams when they made the Super Bowl that one year with Todd Gurley, and they lost to the Patriots. And then they didn't like him anymore, so they gave him to the Lions. And so these guys traded. It seems like the trade has worked out for both teams, but now they have to square off against each other. So you have Matthew Stafford returning to Detroit, his old hometown, or not hometown, but home field, and he's gonna have to take on a fan base that he was once the pride and joy of. And obviously the Lions are gonna be gunning for a victory here, and I personally am also gunning for a Detroit victory just because I've never seen this franchise succeed. It would be so good to finally see them win a game. But the caveat with that is there is a very alarming trend when it comes to 6-seed versus 3-seed matchups in the NFC in recent history. And let me take you through a couple of these games. I had it recently. It might take me a second to pull it up. In the 2019 playoffs, the 6th-seeded Philadelphia Eagles traveled to Chicago to play against the Bears, and they beat the 3rd-seeded Bears. In the 2020 playoffs, the 6th-seeded Minnesota Vikings traveled to New Orleans to play against the 3rd-seeded Saints, and they beat the Saints. In the 2021 playoffs, the 6th-seeded Los Angeles Rams traveled to the 3rd-seeded Seattle Seahawks, and they beat the Seahawks. Sorry about that. The classroom that I was in was about to start having a class, so someone walked in through the door, and I had to figure out a new classroom to go to. So, a little bit of a location shift. But as I was saying, 2 years ago, the 6-seeded 49ers traveled to Dallas, and they take down the 3-seeded Cowboys. They win that game. Last year, the 6-seeded New York Giants go to Minnesota to take on the Minnesota Vikings, and they win that game. So, what have we learned? We have learned that in the last 5 years, the 6th seed in the NFC goes to the 3 seed, and they beat that team. And if we look at the trend going into this year, we have some very concerning news for the Lions, because not only is it just some random 6th seed, this is the guy. This is the only guy in the entire league that knows how to play in your stadium better than your own quarterback. You have Matthew Stafford, the king of the Lions, the king of the jungle. He was your franchise quarterback. He was the pride and joy of the Lions fan base for so long. He returns to Detroit with his new team as the 6th seed, and he's really the one that knows this franchise, this fan base, and this stadium the best of any guy. So you got Dan Campbell going against a proven Super Bowl, multi-time Super Bowl attendee and winner in Sean McVay. He had one offseason, yeah, but he's right back there. Matthew Stafford has now won a Super Bowl. He's put up another very nice wide receiver campaign for a guy. Last time he put up a very nice wide receiver campaign for a guy. Look what happened. And now you have Buccaneers breaking like basically every rookie receiving record that there is. So this spells success for the Los Angeles Rams. They are a dangerous 6th seed, and as much as I want to root for the Lions, and I do want the Lions to win, I want them to have their chance at glory after all these years. Personally, my gut feeling is telling me that the Rams are going to win this game. They're going to charge into Detroit, and Matthew Stafford is going to silence this crowd, and it is going to be tremendously painful just for general football fans, and for Lions fans, it's going to be heartbreaking pain. But sadly, I do think that the Rams are going to win this game, and that is my second upset of the weekend. And then lastly, you've got Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is a holiday in the U.S. So Monday, January 15th is the very last playoff game of Super Wildcard Weekend. You've got the 5th seeded Philadelphia Eagles traveling to Tampa Bay to challenge the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a 5th seed versus a 4th seed. The Buccaneers, yet again, they played in one of the worst divisions of football, the worst division in all of football, with the NFC South. They barely finished above 500, and they yet win their division because everyone else is pretty bad. And then you have the Eagles, who at one point were the best team in all of football. They're at 9-1. They had only dropped one game to the Jets, and that too was kind of a meltdown loss. They were rolling. They really looked like easy repeats to go to the Super Bowl yet again for the NFC. And then what happened? They just fell completely apart. They had bad losses to good teams, which made sense. You know, the Cowboys and the 49ers were going to be obvious challenges, so no one really is blaming them for dropping those games. But then you have very puzzling defeats like the Cardinals. Like, what is going on there? You drop to the Seahawks, who were fighting for a playoff spot, but they ultimately didn't even make it. So that loss really hurts. And then you lost to the Giants most recently. That I don't think should truly be counted because Jalen Hurts hurt his finger. So what started off as a beautiful start to the season has now really melted and morphed into these ugly team that really shouldn't be the 5 seed, but that's where they are now. They finish at 11-6, and yeah, I think they just need to rise past the dysfunction and the injury. If Jalen Hurts is healthy in this game, they need to get their minds locked in and figure it out. This team is too talented to get bounced in the first round. And that being said, I don't think they are going to Tampa Bay, even though they won this division. This is such a weak division. Whoever won the NFC South, regardless of who they were facing, I did have them losing immediately. I think that the Bucs get bounced. They just beat the Panthers 9-0. You couldn't score a touchdown against the league worst Carolina Panthers. Like, that is not a promising showcase. 2 weeks ago, they also lost to the Saints. So 2 pretty bad weeks for the Buccaneers, in my opinion. That's not a promising showcase. The Eagles, they won one, they lost one, but the one that they lost was not entirely their fault. So if Jalen Hurts is playing quarterback for the Eagles in this game, if his finger is feeling fine, if he is healthy, the Eagles are all around just too good of a team to lose this game, and I think personally that they will win it. Now, if Jalen Hurts is not available to play this game, that's where things change. Then the Eagles are set back quite a bit. I do think that they have the superior coaching, they have the superior talent and depth, and really they are a much better roster as a whole. But when you lose your quarterback and you're later like that, especially this late in the season, it is going to have an effect on everyone. And Baker still ended the month of December. He had a very nice month. He could surprise some people with a victory here. This could be an interesting game. But I think if Jalen Hurts is quarterback, then the Philadelphia Eagles should relatively easily win this game. I know that after they dropped their first loss, someone came to me and said, like, oh, are the Eagles frauds? And I was like, wow, that's ridiculous. That's such a hater statement. And I really want that to be true, But if the Eagles lose like this, then I'll be forced to accept the fact that they were frauds. They got to 9-1, and I guess they really didn't deserve it because they would have ended the season in spectacularly horrible fashion. But personally, I think that they can scrape it together and at least get a victory over these Buccaneers. So yeah, I'm going for a third upset to end Wildcard Weekend. Once again, this is Super Wildcard Weekend. You've got 6 games over the span of 3 days, and just to give you one last look at who I think is going to be winning each of these games, I've got the Browns over the Texans, the Chiefs over the Dolphins, the Bills over the Steelers, the Cowboys over the Packers, the Rams over the Lions, and the Eagles over the Buccaneers. And just in case you are wondering what that would look like going forward, well, you'll have to give me a second because I didn't pull up a bracket. 2024 playoff bracket. Yeah, in case you are interested in knowing what that would look like for the divisional round matchups, that would result in a Browns and Ravens matchup, a divisional rivalry that would take place in Baltimore. Then you would get yet another matchup between the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, but this time it would be different because it would actually take place in Buffalo. Kansas City would be playing their first away game in the AFC since Patrick Mahomes has been quarterback, so that would be very exciting. Then on the NFC side of things, you would get a matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys, which we've seen before. It's always a fun game. We saw it earlier this year twice. Very fun matchups. And then you would get yet another showdown between the Rams and the 49ers, and those games are always really down to the wire. Playoff games, end of season games. I feel like it's always entertaining regardless. These teams literally just played each other and it came down to the wire, even though it was led by backups. But yeah, it would end up in 3 divisional games and the classic Bills-Chiefs game. So personally, I would be very excited for that divisional round matchup. It's nice to see teams face off against each other for a third time. I think it can be quite cool. A couple years ago, you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost to the Saints both of the times in the regular seasons pretty badly. But then on the road, the Buccaneers challenged the Saints and they won that. So you never know what can happen. It'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. I'll continue to post more videos as the week progresses. This will probably go out Wednesday night, and I'll see what else I can get out before the